Let's talk commercial human space systems. We're talking about commercial spaceflight. Here's a quick overview. We'll do a brief introduction, history of commercial human spaceflight, suborbital flight, and then orbital flight. The original manned spaceflight started in the early 1960s with Yuri Gagarin on April 12, 1961. Governments were the only organizations going into space at this time. Recently, government budgets have changed and technological innovations provided an environment for private industry to enter the space race. Within the last few years, this has truly become a reality. This trend is advancing and evolving as a legitimate industry and method of transportation. In 1999, Dr. Peter Diamandis, through the formation of the X Prize Foundation, had a call to action for privatizing and commercializing spaceflight. The X Prize sparked development with a $10 million prize and over 20 teams competed. Scaled Composites in Mojave, California demonstrated a successful flight test on June 21, 2004. The official record was set and the Ansari X Prize was awarded to them on October 4, 2004. Let's back up a moment and look at a timeline of historical events that led to the development of what is now referred to as Virgin Galactic. Here's a timeline of those events. As society, we tend to think of spaceflight in chunks of time, starting with the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, in 1961, through the reign of the Space Shuttle. This encompasses Mercury, Gemini, and the Apollo missions, as well as the various space stations that were put into orbit. Then we think of small transitional times like when commercialized spaceflight began in 1999, all the way through the final part of that with Scaled Composites proving its validity and winning the X Prize in 2004, and then of course the creation of Virgin Galactic. And technically all that has happened since then, including the massive accident with Virgin Galactic and now the first and second commercially launched manned crew Dragon capsule that delivers humans to the International Space Station for the United States. Suborbital spaceflight achieves flights to altitude qualifying as space, but do not actually achieve or maintain orbit. Typically, these are short duration flights, like a 90-minute trip to Japan from New Mexico as a concept idea. Until commercialization makes that trip a reality, these flights will typically take off and land at the same location. Suborbital flights cannot reach the International Space Station. Spaceship One was the first spacecraft to successfully achieve suborbital manned spaceflight as a private company. There was no government funding or support, just the idea of doing it, and of course winning the Ansari X Prize. This is often likened to the early transatlantic flights by airplanes and then the first man-powered flight in the 70s with the Gossamer Condor. Spaceship One's mothership, aka White Knight, lifts the spacecraft to 50,000 feet. This is above 80% or more of the atmosphere. There, it drops it, allowing Spaceship One to burn its hybrid rocket and launch into a parabolic arc, achieving suborbital flight. This graphic, although not super clear with its text, does provide you some look at how that arc is represented and then how the spacecraft could glide back to Earth with its, quote, carefree feather atmospheric entry. It was quite astounding. If it were not for the X Prize Foundation, Scaled Composites, and its president and chief engineer, and of course the business tycoon Richard Branson, commercial spaceflight may not be what it is today. Breaking down the evolution of their invention, we can put it into 4 parts. The initial development was for a glider test flight with concurrent control and propulsion system certification. Then, Spaceship One configuration was used for the Ansari X Prize. It was designed to carry 3 passengers. The next version, Spaceship Two, could carry 6 passengers. And then a continuation of refining engines along with other system developments that allow longer suborbital flights. This led to Virgin Galactic. Operating out of New Mexico, Virgin Galactic began to prove the validity of private human spaceflight. It started to come to fruition as the company conducted test flights in 2011 and 2012. The first commercial flight was planned to happen in the next few years, but unfortunately disaster struck, delaying their efforts. The airfoil that slows the spacecraft during the feather flight was engaged moments too soon during the test flight, tearing the spacecraft apart upon re-entry, killing one of the crew and bringing scrutiny down upon the validity they were trying to prove. Commercialized spaceflight didn't give up, though. With the retirement of the shuttle program in 2011, we had a need for new spacecraft that could support the International Space Station. Russians responded to this demand, and for a while not only were the Soyuz missions the only way to get to and from the ISS, but they were able to quasi-capitalize on the commercialization of spaceflight. They have successfully sold tickets at $20 million a person to the ultra-rich and allowed them to stay on their parts of the ISS for up to 10 days. Not to be outdone, Elon Musk developed his own response in the United States. Not only has SpaceX developed reusable rockets that land vertically, but they are currently the only commercial company to dock with the ISS. The Dragon capsule has successfully docked unmanned and manned missions to the ISS recently. Riding upon the Falcon Heavy rocket, Elon sent a Tesla Roadster hurling through space towards Mars, just to prove that SpaceX rockets could do it. Even now, we all watch in awe as SpaceX continually launches Starship rockets, merely the top of a much larger system out of Boca Chica, Texas. The commercial aspect of his company is not lost on Elon. These rockets are cheap, reusable, and catching the eye of the world. He plans manned missions to Mars soon, with the hopes of returning its passengers, but knowing that someone will likely perish, much like many of his test flights. There is a lot to come from his company still. Even Jeff Bezos of Amazon is in on this game. He's developed his own system for commercial space flight. It's called Blue Origin. This means the 2 wealthiest people in the world are in a race to true privatized commercial space flights. This endeavor is reportedly why Bezos stepped down from running Amazon. He needed to focus on his efforts with Blue Origin. And of course, Boeing and the Orion spacecraft is the basket that NASA is putting their eggs in. Before long, the Artemis missions will be underway and NASA will be headed back to the moon, working right alongside companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin. There's even talk of it not being long before we have orbiting hotels. Is your next family vacation to a space station? Maybe. As we close out this presentation, keep these things in mind. The next 10 to 20 years will bring major changes as commercial organizations work to access space. Their major goal is to reduce cost for access to space while improving safety and reliability. Similar situations here to what commercial airline industries faced in the 1930s. Significant number of jobs in aerospace will be provided by these companies over the next few years.